We're at 6:02. We'll go ahead and proceed on with the agenda. All right, please note, Councilmember Johnson is here online, myself and others in attendance, if you will, Deanna. And we'll proceed on with the rest of it. So I move to approve the agenda as presented. Joe, do you have any additions or deletions you want to do to the agenda?
Nope, this looks good to me.
All right, hearing that, we'll move on with the agenda as presented. First is the approval of the minutes dated February 6th, 2024. Chair has no revisions or questions in regards to that. How are you, Councilman Johnson?
Chair, do we want to do public comment before the minutes?
I keep doing that. All right, let's back up. So let's do public comments. Are those individuals who wish to make public comments before the committee, will they identify themselves either by raising their hands here in the room or by raising your hands on Zoom? I don't see anybody raising your hands. Just word of advice, I consider staff and council members as part of the public. So if anytime you guys want to pipe off, go for it. All right, seeing anyone no raise their hands, we'll proceed on, close public comments and move on again to approval of the minutes. Again, I had no revisions or questions. Councilor Johnson, how are you with the minutes?
They look good to me.
All right. So unless there are objections, we will move forward with the minutes as approved. Hearing no objections, they are approved. Let's move on to approval of warrants and claims. Consideration claims approval report dated February 26, 2024. I at this stage have no questions. I'm unable to get into my email, but I assume I have no questions in email. I will bring it at council if I grab any questions in the meantime. Councilor Johnson, do you have any questions in regards to the warrants?
No questions at this time.
All right. Any objections to approving the warrants as presented?
Nope.
All right, we will move forward with the approvals with the claims as approved. All right, agenda bill. So discussion ERP project status update.
Yes, I certainly have one, Chair, for council tonight. If you don't mind, I will share my screen. All right. So good evening, council. Tonight is the monthly ERP project status update. Just to go over, provide at least a brief overview of some of high-level changes overall. So what has changed in terms of our staffing resources? Well, our term limited management analyst left the city on January the 31st. And through some very sleuth recruiting that HR has conducted on behalf of the finance department, we are able to find a replacement quickly. So that person, Chris Rotel, will be starting with us on March the 11th for the next 10 months. This is a term limited position overall, but we're really thankful to have him on board. Given his background generally in tech, he's looking to move into more of the financial space overall. And so we're looking forward to that kind of marriage overall and to support this project moving forward, taking on maybe some of the responsibilities of our current staff to free up their time so that they can focus on implementing the ERP project. Talked about this previously, but where are we going overall? It's a new year with new processes, and we'll kind of show some of those processes that we're hoping to evolve here shortly. And of course, the goal is to complete all 4 phases by the end of the year. So where are we currently right now? Well, the first phase really dealt with the financials overall. At the top there, you can kind of see the key moving from red to green. We want to get as close to green as possible over time. Red is pretty much the starting kind of milestone overall. And you'll kind of see this progression across a lot of the modules. Below that, you'll see the modules or products that we're working to implement overall. In the case of the financials, you'll see things like the accounting or GL module, the cash management module, the accounts payable module, and so on. So what are some changes from January? Well, I was prepared to sign off on the end user from moving from the end user training milestone to the complete closeout milestone for accounts receivable and cash sharing. And we would talk about moving from that end user training to complete closeout. One of the things that I value overall is really just some basic user instructions in case we need to continue to coach, remind people, set up the appropriate procedures around that. And so a document like you see here that would benefit the organization overall, where if people happen to come and go, within the organization, that we can have something that will be permanent overall at the city. So screenshots like you see here, followed by steps, very beneficial. And that's kind of what I want to see towards the end of each and every separate module that we go through. With that said, those are some of the two, and I've got some pulsating boxes for everyone in blue. So just focus on those two: accounts receivable and cashiering. You'll see them within dark green. The next phase for us in terms of the financials itself is making sure that we can move the finance department. So we're working to decentralize and provide end user training for accounts payable, general billing, and analytics and reporting. But first, we've taken just a brief moment to spend to create and vet an ideal process for the city overall that we would then implement as a part of the ERP system. The ERP system, as I've kind of stated before, is really a means to an end. It's not the end of itself, and we should be adapting our processes to make sure that they, certainly help us with our internal control processes and so on. That was really the value that council was sold on in terms of this product when the first discussions happened around in 2018. So we first wanted to create and vet the ideal processes for the city. The challenge is now is utilizing the appropriate business rules that Tyler Muniz has available to us and setting up the appropriate workflow to enact our desired processes. Now, just to kind of show you what I'm talking about in terms of processes, here's kind of a draft decentralized accounts payable process that we're working to implement overall. This will involve the departments. So the departments have certainly an important role to play in terms of creating the batches, entering the invoices, adding attachments. After that, it then goes towards accounts payable for their review process overall, as well as accounting in their review process too. So there's three kind of decision points in here, which are demonstrated by the diamonds overall. Requires the manager to approve the invoice. It requires AP to approve the invoice, and it requires accounting to also approve the invoice in order to move through the process overall. So we're working with Tyler to set up those decision points basically within the system, which is where that discussion around business rules and processes, or not processes, but workflows come into play overall. And I need a little bit more education around that. Certainly Tyler has received this, so they know where we're coming from. And ideally, when we can get them in a room, which right now is scheduled for March at this point, we can actually kind of unleash, I guess, the full potential, help us to, understand how to set up these appropriately within security and so on, so that we can move forward as an organization and get this accounts payable module fully completed with end users provided with appropriate training. In addition, we're hoping similarly to set up a decentralized general billing process. Right now, all this information is coming into a central point within the finance department. We'd prefer to disperse that and then have the finance department really, really review the work of those departments and what they're doing. If they don't, meet the standards overall, then it will go back to the departments to, update and then resubmit basically. So moving on from that, the financials phase one, there's also a couple additional elements that we're working on as well, the accounting, GL, and cash management modules as well. We've recently and have another upcoming training basically on Friday as well regarding the bank reconciliation manager and a month-end closeout process as well. These are two things that the accountant is tackling at the city overall. People don't quite realize how complicated the bank rec process is around here. There's roughly 10 to 15 steps that take about 2 hours every day that she has to work towards completing, in addition to what she needs to do in order to make sure that the department works effectively and efficiently. I like to call her basically the cog in the machine overall. If she's not, if she doesn't have the ability to really function very effectively, then the entire finance department would fall apart. So making sure that she's got the tools available to her is really critical. And that bank reconciliation manager is going to be really hopefully beneficial in terms of freeing up some of her time moving forward, because it is a daily process and it's roughly 2 hours every day that she has to go through in order to make sure that our banks investments are reconciled to what we incorporate into our financial system overall. In addition to that, the standard, one of the questions that will come up is, what are some of the things that maybe we don't have right now that we need to move towards? And maybe what are the things that we don't necessarily need that we should probably plow into other areas? You'll notice that in pink up there, you'll see the purchasing, e-procurement, capital assets, project and grant accounting, as well as contract management. Those 4 modules have been deferred, and they were deferred last year. We need to continue the exploration of whether they're actually necessary or not within the organization, or if there's something actually more beneficial to making sure that we can operate as efficiently as possible within the city itself. And one of those things that we're going to have to eventually consider is the content manager. Right now, the standard edition of Tyler Content Manager is not very effective for the needs of the city. For example, it doesn't allow the ability to search for invoices and their attachments within Tyler, or allow the addition of notes when completing a journal entry. So with that said, often what the accountant is having to do is, instead of being able to type in a box, for example, some notes around with the journal entry, she has to attach a file that she's created, basically in Excel or Word document, to the journal entry itself and append that to that. You can't really search a scanned document. And so that makes it challenging if she's trying to look up notes later, right, overall, to figure out where things are. So we may want to consider upgrading to a different edition of the Tyler Content Manager, something that may be a bit more robust and helpful overall for the city. But that will have to be in consideration if we're prepared to drop something as well, because we understand that, budget regarding this project is tight. So with that said, probably where a lot of the energy is getting spent right now is human capital management, which is phase 2. Staff right now, particularly the accounting manager and the financial specialist that handles primarily payroll of the city, are engaged in a 6-step configuration audit to ensure that every payroll table and program is updated and accurate. As council knows, we've gone through some updates, especially in regards to the Teamsters contract. And then in addition to that, council just approved a change in the salary schedule for M&P fairly recently as well. And so they need to make sure that all that information is accurate and updated within Tyler Munis, as well as our current legacy system. And consequently, going through this configuration audit will help the city to run informative parallels with the legacy system, which basically means running 2 payroll processes, one in the legacy system, as well as one in the new system that we're attempting to implement, and then checking to see if they actually match. That is really critical before we actually go live. That's part of the testing process and something that we need to do here at the city before we take any step about saying, yeah, let's go live. We need to make sure that what we're doing is accurate within Tyler. But before that, we need to make sure that the system is set up appropriately before we can actually run those parallels. And we want to make sure that any problems that do arise during testing and validation can be easily resolved. So a lot of this requires updates. Right now, we've completed step 1 and step 2 that you can see here. We've updated the location codes, the salary tables, especially the Teamsters table changed pretty dramatically. The accrual tables, so any changes to vacation accruals and stuff like that. Allocation codes, basically that means where are people distributed within our fund structure? Are they paid out of the general fund, or are they paid out of the utilities, for example? And then after that, finance has gone through an effort to update the paymaster and the deductions and benefit master as well. There's different pay types as well as deduction and benefit types as well that we have to make sure that are updated. And then in addition, we've got after that, steps 3 through 6 include additional kind of programs within the payroll system itself. Eventually, towards the end, we have to make sure that every employee is correct. And so that will come around step 4, step 5, before we get into refreshing the test environment and documenting those procedures. But right now, we're engaged in a configuration audit as we speak. In addition to that, right now, as we kind of stated previously, the go live date for the payroll module is the first payroll period in April, which means that basically March is going to be an incredibly heavy month. We have to get through that configuration audit. In addition, we have to make sure that we test and validate as well, as much as possible. In addition, we have to run parallels to make sure that they are extremely accurate and that there's no funny business happening within the payroll system itself. There's about 100 kind of different testing and validation items that we also need to kind of check off the list to make sure that we can do things properly and that we know how to do things. And then in addition to that, and obviously I've highlighted this in bold, and because of the additional Tyler support hours needed around the go live date, remember we've extended the payroll or moved the go live date from the end of December, or really the first payroll period in January, to April. And what does that mean? Often people don't think that time has a cost, but in this case, it certainly does. And as a result, I've asked for a change order that would utilize $45,000 in contingency funds established as a part of the contract in order to provide us with the additional support hours needed around the go live date. So there is certainly some cost around moving the go live date. And I think, fully I understand what the impact is overall of those changes in dates. And staff certainly does too. With that said, following the go live date, which will incorporate existing timesheet processes, the goal then is to work on implementing ExecuTime, which is really an exception-based timekeeping process with the employee self-service. So that means basically extending it out to the employees so that they can input their time into this module, the time and attendance module that Tyler has, and then submitting it through that program so that Tanya, our payroll account, isn't necessarily having to type hours in for each and every person or import those hours in through really a side process is what we've got set up right now. The next phase after phase 2 is phase 3. The city has not been assigned an implementation consultant, and Tyler is currently looking for one to help us through the utility billing phase kind of as we speak. So there really is no news on that. In terms of phase 4, that has got off to a very fast start. They have completed the first batch of cataloging assets and uploading to the testing environment. And this is primarily the Parks and Public Works Department that's working on this. And Brendan Ecker, our GIS analyst, deserves a lot of credit for the time and effort as well as staff into this itself. They do certainly know what they're doing. And Mike, sitting in the room there, has been very beneficial given his experience with Tyler Munis and the ERP system and getting that to work at his previous place. Second on this list is starting basically the Parks and Public Works Department is starting to build the work order portion of the system, which includes the creation of activity codes, such as, changing oil or something like that. Activity codes are used when performing work on any particular asset. Next month, the Parks and Public Works Department will work to connect the GIS to the EAM. So Brendan's really looking forward to that. And right now, the projected go live date regarding the EAM system is roughly September the 30th right now. So with that said, I'm happy to try to answer any questions you may have, and I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Councilman Johnson, any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
I may have questions later, but I don't have it. I need to chew on it for a while, Drew, before I ask. So,
Yeah.
Well,
all right.
I may come back later.
Okay.
Actually, Chair, I might have one.
Go ahead.
So on those, there's sort of like a list of steps for how to do things. At my job, we have similar things for inputting grades and stuff like that. Now, software sometimes changes, and then someone has to go back and update all that stuff. Is there a plan for what happens if that button changes and moves somewhere else?
Well, ideally they'll notify us that they're going to upgrade to another, 2.1, 2.2, right? For example, version 2.2.
Right.
The goal when those happen is basically to actually move that updated version into a testing environment and actually have people work in that test environment to see what has changed. Usually there's a list of what has changed that comes out, and then basically taking them through that testing environment to see, okay, let's play around with it in this environment before we actually unleash it right across the board within the city itself, or actually go live with that updated version, so that they can get comfortable with those changes overall and they know exactly what they're looking at. That's usually how we've handled it with the legacy system right now, is to make sure that it's kind of combined in a testing environment, but that people are playing around with it and getting comfortable with any of those changes. Those changes are reported to them overall, and then they can go through and see as things working in that testing environment before we then refresh the actual environment that we're working on.
Cool, thank you.
Do we currently have a test development environment?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Do we currently have a production environment?
Yes.
And so come April 1, we'll be moving payroll from test to prod?
Correct.
Yeah, so basically we've got to work within both environments. So we're setting up production at the same time that we're setting up testing. Often we're refreshing from production to the test environment and then playing around the test to make sure it works. And then going back and configuring the production environment a little bit, and then there's a lot of back and forth between both systems generally. But not only do we have a testing environment, we have a train environment, we have a train 2 environment, and then EAM has their own environment as well. So there's multiple environments that we're working in. Usually you've got separate modules or people focus on separate environments and testing it out in that space. So for example, payroll's operating in the testing environment while, I've been asked for a refresh recently in the train environment. So Kyla, our account, can, figure out how to utilize the bank reconciliation module basically within the train environment, basically in practice in there.
Okay, and because you're doing SaaS, software as a service, which kind of breaks it up to the vendor. Tyler manages the core product, and then we do the customization for our processes on top of it. Have we discussed with Tyler when they expect to do core product updates and how that will flow with us through test, prod, train?
My experience with Tyler on that matter is not good. Sometimes it's a surprise.
Meaning lacking, or you don't like what they do?
I don't like what they do.
Okay. That's why I asked.
Sometimes
The danger
they
with
forget-
SaaS is they can change it without telling.
Sometimes they forget to tell us they're monkeying with things. And then you'll see everybody running around City Hall
Like, why is it doing
working
this?
on things, and then it gets fixed. But most of the time they do send Tyler alerts to let you know that they'll be updating the core product on this time and what those updates incorporate. Some of the updates are mandatory, some of them are not. Kind of like Windows.
Piece, but it'd be a good conversation to talk about what is the configuration control of your product, your production system, and what's the coordination between us and Tyler of, again, hopefully doing it to dev first.
Yeah.
Even for their stuff, and then moving it to prod. Okay. Sorry, I've had some fun and games in this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that information I gave you was about 5 years old. I haven't been working with them lately. So hopefully they've gotten better, but we will have that conversation.
Okay. I'm in a much stricter environment than you are, so it's very sensitive to me. Okay, cool. Thank you. What was next on the agenda? Come here. Oh, you're almost there. So for council open house, at least my thinking at this stage, one, just because it would be difficult for us to have the conversation. One with Carragon, and two, Joe, you're online, so I'd like a little more in depth, but I've got a list of what I think are potential, again, if the intent is to have informal open house, there is potential for, well, it's pop-up questions, soup du jour. So I've kind of created a list of, here are the hot subjects, I think, and broken them out by committee. I like to send that out and review and have people say, no, that's a bad idea, or add to it of what we think we ought to be prepped for. From there, I would like to work how we would, I don't want to put somebody in a position in that meeting to answering a question where later on others will say, well, I don't agree with what you said, or that's not really where we are. So I'd like to do some prep work up front, at least write out, here's where we are with this. What are our constraints? What are our issues? Where we think we might be going. I'll try to work up a test subject and a kind of format. Mostly my training was engineering, so it'll be bulleted chart, not more fancy than that. And have that discussion. So I'll get that list out this week for review for city administrator, mayor, council to add and subtract to. And then let's then talk about how we get those subjects onto a piece of paper and how we as a council agree. This is where we think we are with this particular subject, and prep to that. But that's about as deep as I wanted to go today. Joe, do you have any questions, comments? Does that make sense?
If we did have a session that was, where we were more collectively, on a dais kind of setting, it would be kind of nice to have the chairs of the committees share out some of those bullet points to kind of just set the stage and also just remind us as we're going into the meeting, and then and then mingle. It's just a thought.
Yeah, and that's my intent, is to try to get us as a council on a page for what we think might be the hot subjects or subjects that come up. And really work that through the committee. So yeah, I would expect the chairs during the open house probably to answer or to delegate. But even then, at general discussions on the floor, you may not be on Public Works and they come by and ask you, well, what's going on with utility rates? That we at least have had a discussion, that you're prepped for that kind of discussion.
Yep, that sounds good.
Cool, okay. And then next subject, again, I'm not gonna dive into it. Discussion, other than, because we pretty well settled, we're gonna talk council goals and objectives and reaffirmation. Has there been any discussion in regard, we talked about a facilitator last time?
I reached out to the facilitator, and the dates that he had given were the dates in the doodle poll. So those are the 3 that he's available. So far, I still am waiting for responses from 2 council members, but so far, Saturday, April 6th has the most, with Friday, April 5th being the second most.
Okay. I'm probably one that hasn't responded. I admit.
That's okay.
I can support either date.
I'm gonna be in Paris at the time.
You have no sympathy for me.
Yeah, for the April dates. Yeah, and I saw in the poll that the March date was less popular. So yeah, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Okay. All right, and any thoughts on venues or?
We were thinking the fire department, because they have the overhead sound system,
Oh, okay,
and then it wouldn't cost us anything.
okay. My only other thought was doing it at the hotel, not
Oh.
Salish, but the other one, just to. But I assume there would be a charge for the room, and if we can avoid the charge for the room, yeah, let's go ahead and do the fire department.
Well, it's not that expensive, but it just depends on how much you want to charge, how much you want to spend.
And you can ask my wife, next to nothing.
It's your decision, council's decision.
Council decision.
Mhm.
Okay, Joe or Mike, so remind me Monday, let's ask that question of council of preference on venue. And see if there's any puts one way or the other. Okay. All right, rest of it's upcoming agenda items. Let's dive in then to draft council agenda. Scroll us down to that. There, you're right there. All right, so we'll have a roundtable at 6 PM discussing housing and transportation elements. Okay, and then for Sarah, we'll move into the 7 PM regular agenda. Public hearing, presentation, appointments of commissioners and reappointment, okay. And proclamation resilience month. And then we'll move on to consent agenda approval of council meeting, approval of claims reports, ordinance amending building code SMC for ordinance amending SMC regarding business license B&O taxes. All right, then we'll have community development, land use element, finance administration committee,
Tax discussion.
Right, we're the one add-on.
yeah, I'm still stuck on another one. I thought we did an introduction on some subject last council, where that was the first reading, and then there would be a second reading.
Isn't that the business licenses?
Business license.
Is that the one, Drew?
The second reading on the business license?
That's the one that first came to committee and wasn't quite ready, but we moved it to council for first reading and then second reading?
Yeah, basically, so we gave a presentation at the previous F&A committee. There was probably still some lingering questions, right, regarding that. Presentation was given at the last council meeting. I believe all questions were identified and answered generally. And yes, it's coming back for a second reading. I don't think there's any sort of outstanding questions regarding that, but I'm happy to take emails or any of the questions here necessarily if people, if council feels that we haven't done enough homework on that yet.
Okay. Thank you, Drew. All right, then we'll have during F&A, we'll have a discussion on, basically, this is the one from the attorney of what we should and should not say in regards to a potential voter tax increase. All right. And then we'll move into committee of the whole, mayor's report, commission liaison reports, and placeholders for executive sessions?
Yeah.
All right. Joe, do you have any questions or comments in regard to that? Any changes?
No, that looks pretty good.
All right. If you'll make the change to include the tax discussion, lesser objections, we'll move forward with that council agenda. Hearing no
Excellent.
objections, we'll move forward. Thank you very much. And I think that's the end of the agenda. Any other discussions? Or we can move to adjourn.
We can go ahead and adjourn.
All right, let's go ahead and move to adjourn. Thank you, everyone.